Hello and welcome to the One Deeper podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Peter Hendrix. Peter is an assistant professor at the School of Humanities and Digital Sciences at Tilburg University. He teaches linear algebra and statistics, both of which are courses he taught me. And it's always a pleasure to speak to Peter, and we always have such a great conversation. And I'm happy to share that with you today. Enjoy. Okay, so Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time. And by the way, this is just going to be the audio, so even though I'm seeing you, but people will be listening to it on the podcast app or whatever.
All right, sure thing.
Hopefully,
You sure about that,
yeah.
Udesh?
Huh?
You sure about that?
About just the audio?
I think it'd be nice, actually. I mean,
No, because just having the video, I mean, would be nice as well. But then it would only sort of work right now for things happening remotely. Because if I had to do it in person, then I would have to like it's a whole different setup, right? It's way more
right,
involved.
makes
So
sense.
I figured the entry point is pretty low, so anyone can like download the podcast app and just like listen to it.
I
So
think.
it's pretty easy. But anyway, this has been sort of like a long time coming in terms of we've had some pretty really great conversations over the past year, like past 6 months, and I couldn't think of a better person to start this with. So I appreciate your time um, in joining to talk about just random stuff, I guess. But I did have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, but let's just start with like, so I was thinking about how I should ask um, the like how you got to where you are, but instead of, but we tend to look back at our lives and make everything seem like it was done on purpose, um, so I'm
For
trying
sure.
to avoid that
Makes sense.
a little bit. So I'll ask it a different way. So I'll be like, okay, so what was your trajectory, to getting to where you are right now? Like in terms of let's just start from like school. Like did you actually? Like, I mean, are you one of those people who were lucky enough to be like, you know what, I want to be a scientist. I want to go to university. How'd that happen?
It sounds gonna sound completely horrible, but yes, I was.
You
I
okay?
was telling my family members on birthdays when I was like 10 or 11, when they asked me, what do you want to be? I was like, professor. That's what I want to be.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I kind of worked towards it on a very, I would say, I wouldn't say a straight line necessarily. There were definitely times of doubt, but it was always sort of in the back of my mind. And I think it was almost imposed by my environment in a way where I would be the smartest kid in class throughout basically my school career. And that was like the one thing I could get recognition for. So I figured, hell, why not go with that? Why not?
Right. Like like, so how, like, I mean, did you have a maybe like a someone in like a teacher or a professor who sort of motivated you like in that direction, or did you just always knew like how did you come to know about the university, like academia, and how like that how did you come to know that that was an option?
Well, like I said, I was telling my family members at the age of 10, 11. I had no idea what it meant by being a
Oh,
professor.
right. Okay.
It was just it alliterated with my name. Like people
Right.
would
Right.
call me
Right.
Professor Peter when I was like,
Right.
and it just, it's only way afterwards that I started to realize what it actually entails. And I was like, Is this really what I want?" Especially teaching was something that doesn't really come natural to me. I tend to be very introverted. It's something that I had to work on pretty actively to sort of come to at least do a reasonable job at that. Science is something that came a bit easier. Statistics, numbers have always been my strength, and in high school, people basically told me like, whatever you do, do something where that sort of strength really is allowed to shine. So people recommended like go study math, which I actually did, or econometrics, or something like that. Not necessarily in the direction of actually going into academia. That was for much later.
Uh, were like so was your first experience teaching in university? Was that the first time you
It
had
was, yeah,
like you?
It was an undergrad. I was a TA for a stats course. Um, that turned out to be pretty nice. Like I was extremely nervous for like
Right.
a day and a half at least before that. Whenever I thought about it, my hands started trembling. It was a real challenge to get into that. And then pretty much after the first week, I immediately realized like students are really nice if you treat them nicely. As long as you allow them to go with the flow, you give them a nice and positive environment. There's nothing to really be all that scared of. They're just humans. They have no bad intentions a priori. So as long as you give them the room to feel well in your course and to try to give them a nice learning experience, then everything is fine. And yeah, I actually kind of liked it immediately. I was immediately sold on the concept.
So okay, so you when you were in school, so you were good with numbers. People around you were telling you that were good with numbers. Like, by the way, this is actually interesting because I had the exact opposite experience, right?
I find that
Yeah.
hard to believe, Udesh, given your performance.
Like, even though I find myself in the CSI program now,
Mm.
and if you spoke to anyone from my high school, they would be amazed. They'd be like, "This guy." I was never the person who we would go to for help with math homework, you know.
What
But
what
okay, so
what
you
kind of
would.
person are you like, Udesh? What
I
what would
was.
people look to you for?
I was actually known for getting in trouble
Seriously.
and
I mean, I
yeah,
kind
and
of see like you. I could imagine you being like that, but right now you're the complete opposite, right?
yeah, no, and like it's weird because I got in trouble in very weird ways. It's not like in very like crazy way. I mean, not in very traditional way. So basically, the problem most teachers had with me was that I would finish my work in class like pretty quickly, and then I'd get bored,
I
and
get it.
and then I'd cause problems, right? I
You are
like
you
because
are
I
the very intelligent student who couldn't behave after the work was done.
I don't know about very intelligent, but I definitely got bored pretty quickly,
I
and
was the opposite. Like all I had going for me, I had no social skills. I had no personality, no interest, whatever I said. Like, all I had was like, I'm good at this learning thing, so let me focus on that. That's the only thing where I can really shine. Everything else I basically sucked at.
leverage what you have, I guess.
Exactly.
So okay, so and then so when you're finishing school, like I mean, you had to choose to go to university, right? How did you make the decision on what you wanted to study and like where you wanted to go?
You know what? I'm a little hesitant to give the honest answer here, but let me just do it because why not? The
Okay.
honest answer was I picked whatever would make me seem like the most accomplished person in front of my parents. And I think like that's a completely like
I mean,
very
what's
unpopular
wrong with
way to say it.
I
But
mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I
I
mean,
think that's something people sort of tend to underestimate. And it might just be me, it might be a more general thing. But for me, like what really matters in a way is my parents gave me all these opportunities, right? They worked very hard
mhm.
to be able to give me every chance in life that I could possibly have. Um, and I just want to basically like everyone else, I guess, make them proud and make them feel like, hey, this is something we envisaged. And in a way that's kind of more important to me than my personal interest as much, because as long as I can work with numbers, I'm happy. It does The application doesn't really matter to me all that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's great that you said that because I think especially in for our generation, there's this sort of motivation and or people keep telling you, you know, find the things that make you happiest, the things that you love, and find what makes you blah blah blah. But that's such a huge search space, right? It's like, how do you navigate that environment to actually find something useful and having
I would
something like, hey, I just want
no
to
go ahead.
make my parents proud. It's like that's perfectly reasonable thing
That's
to do,
I
right?
mean, for me, it's silly. It makes me look somewhat strange, but I must not be the only person who for whom that's a high priority in
No,
life. You actually
it's so true. I mean, it's the same for me. I have to say
Okay.
that I definitely feel the same way. Because my
Yeah,
parents,
I know a little bit. I know a little bit about your background, right? In your case, it
yeah,
kind of makes more sense than mine. Like my parents didn't have to make sacrifices to that extent, but nonetheless, I mean, my father is definitely my hero up to this day. Um,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
want
That's
to, yeah,
amazing.
I want to do what makes them happy, right?
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's such a good answer. I don't know why why you hesitate
It's an
to say that
maybe
because
it's an unusual answer in more individualistic Western societies than it is
that is
in your
true.
background. Yeah.
That is an interesting point, actually. That is quite true. Like, especially in with the colleagues that I have, I definitely noticed that, and and it's interesting that they're stuck in this sort of moral panic, is because they lack any sort of grounding and connection with their heritage or their history, and that gets really tricky, right, to
This
navigate.
is
All right.
this is something like you asked me sort of in preparation for this podcast. You asked me one question that I could perhaps think about a little bit, which is what is the kind of world that would scare you? And it's exactly
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
just mentioned. It is when we stop having any purpose in our life or considering the world not to have sort of an inherent meaning or have any like social circles that make you want to do things. If any of that is missing, or if all of that is missing, then we are moving around in this world without a concrete plan, and that makes it really, really hard. Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
what you said about parents telling you like as do whatever you do as long as it makes you happy. My parents obviously told me the exact same thing, and for a while it was a real burden to me. Like I didn't know how to handle that expectation. Like how do I accomplish this? No one ever gave me a roadmap to being happy. It actually makes things. It almost felt like a burden rather than a liberty.
Right.
Like for my parents' generation, it was a real liberty. They were forced into very strong expectations about what they would get to do when they grew up. Limitations as well. Like my parents didn't go to university. Did something that my generation was the first to sort of have the liberty on a broader scale. And then they considered it a huge privilege to have all this freedom. And it's definitely a huge privilege, but it comes with this expectation or obligation to make sure that whatever you do, you're happy. If you're not happy, you failed.
No, it's like it's a double-edged sword, right? Because like my parents worked really hard to give me all these options, and having all these options sometimes makes you miserable. It's like, what do I choose, right? How do I move forward,
And I feel
right?
horrible for even stating that, right? It's such a first world problem. Like
No, it's like, no,
even
it's
complaining about it.
100%. It's 100% true. Like, I'll give you like a simple example. Yesterday, I was watching Netflix, right,
Mm.
and I was just watching a movie, and I was watching this movie, and the back of my head, as this movie is playing, I was doing this calculation in my head: is this worth my time, right? Like, I mean, is there a better movie? Is there a better movie that I can watch, right? And then it occurred to me, you know what? If I didn't have the option of just hitting the back button and scrolling through 100 other movies, if this was the only thing that was on TV right now, and that's the only option that I had, I might actually be happier, right?
It's really funny that way. I feel the exact same, and I actually feel I watch less movies now than I did before the internet came along. Like I'm still when I was a child, there was TV. That
Right,
was it,
right. Yep,
and it was like
absolutely.
at most three movies you could watch at one time. Most
Yep.
likely only one. Um, and I actually watched movies. I just sat in front of TV, watched movies. I just don't do that anymore because the time I need to invest to select a movie is simply not worth it to me
Yeah,
anymore.
it's growing really large now. It's interesting. That time that you need to decide is getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so what did you actually study in university? Like, when you did your bachelor's degree?
Yeah, I started off studying math. Found that to be a little bit too abstract. And in addition, I definitely wasn't ready for the amount of daily traveling that was involved. Like I was definitely not ready at the age of 18 to move out of my parents' house. I was very much not equipped with the right practical and social skills at that point. So I decided to stay at home, but that meant that I had to travel like 3 hours every day. And on top of studying math, which is a fairly heavy program, I just physically, mentally perhaps too, but mostly physically couldn't handle keeping up with that. And I just decided to change studies for that reason. Did something completely different. I went into linguistics from math,
Hmm.
which was strange. Finished that degree basically at a decent pace. Um, then studied my master was cognitive neuroscience, which was again, I guess, a pretty drastic change, but it kind of confirms what I told you earlier. I don't care so much about the actual content as long as I'm challenged. I have a very broad range of interest. I actually almost feel bad when I stick with doing the same thing for too long in life because I feel that I'm wasting time for other opportunities that I want to experience as well. Um,
Like,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask. So, if some, I mean, if someone wanted to set themselves up in a way that enables them to do what you do, it's in the sense that move between topics and fields, and um, I feel like if you have sort of a fun, if you grasp some of the fundamental stuff, like very basic mathematics and really understanding how the mathematics works, and statistics, and maybe even physics, I would say, right? You
Mhm.
can sort of dovetail that into a bunch of different fields, right? Like if you know enough physics, for example, you could 100% go work with something to do with the brain, because at the end of the day, it's electrons, and it's ion channels and proton pumps and stuff like that, right? But actually, so I did actually. So just to prepare, I just looked at some of your research, right, and just trying kind of
Mhm.
some of the things that you were ended up, well, like you've been published, you have published, and like what what is it about language that, so is there something particular about language, or is it just the fact that you have the tools to be useful in this field, so you're happy with it? It's like, there's something about it in particular that drives you?
Well, I'll first answer it from the perspective of my BA thesis supervisor, and then I'll move a little bit beyond that. So near the end of my bachelor's, I was writing a thesis. I was a TA in stats courses within the linguistics department, and my BA supervisor, I was considering moving more into sort of the hardcore neuroscience area rather than linguistics. And she told me, "Well, Peter, within linguistics, you're very high up in terms of ability and technical skills. If you move into a more technical field, you would perform on an average level." And I was kind of surprised by the fact that she would use that as a reason to be in a certain field. Like, you're mediocre in this other field, therefore you're better off in
That, I mean,
this.
that's brutal. Like, that's sort of brutally
It's
honest, man.
crazy
Like,
advice,
that's,
right? And I mean,
yeah,
it was completely true, but
yeah,
it
yeah,
was still
absolutely.
strange to me that people would use that as a motivation to go into a certain field. And that's when I really
Yeah.
started thinking about it. Like I told you before, like as long as I can work with numbers, as long as people, especially my parents, appreciate me, I'll pick whatever field that. And it was actually that was sort of a turning point where I really started to look at my own interests, like what do I actually want to do? And I also started realizing if I do something that I really enjoy doing, I'm going to be better at it than something that I simply have sort of a natural talent for, but I don't actually care all that much about. And I
Mhm.
started thinking like, what is it about linguistics that I appreciate? And I think one of the things that I really like is, especially recently within the area of linguistic research, people have been taking quantitative approaches, really looking at patterns in this large space of text where words co-occur in all kind of ways with each other, sentences connect in different ways. And there's a lot of room for statistical discovery there, trying to find patterns that say something about the way that language is organized, but also about the way that we're able to process it in our brains and sort of deal with this huge complicated system internally. And I realized I actually find this fascinating. I never intended this to be fascinating, but I guess just the exposure, the fact that there's a whole new branch of more quantitative research within linguistics that really excited me. Those were things that ultimately made me decide to stay in that field.
Until I came into the CSAI program and took took Paula's class, the language cognition and computation.
Mhm.
I didn't actually realize how little we know about language and I mean how our brains work with language and how language evolved. I just took it for granted, right? No, because you do like it's like the most fundamental thing that you do with your life. You speak and you have language and you communicate, right? You don't stop to think, man, we don't know much about this. I mean, we know a lot now, but in this in the grand scheme of things, it's really got something that's we don't know much about in terms of like I just didn't realize how much we didn't know about it. I just thought it was like a done deal.
No,
But that's
that's one of the beautiful things about it too, right? Just realizing how little we know, not just about language, just about many things in everyday life.
mhm.
We never even consider them. We never even think about them. Like the world is still a massive mystery to us.
Yeah.
We never really. I don't even want to say think about it. Almost understand how little we know.
See, I think there's a good reason for that, right? Like I think it takes a certain kind of mindset to be okay with knowing how little you know about things. Like for the average person, that's actually quite torturous. Like they lose their sense of safety and structure in the world as long as they feel like they know enough to basically live their lives. That's good, but like if you rip that band-aid off, it could be quite an anxiety provoking uh, anxiety provoking experience.
For me, it was
But
actually the opposite, Udesh. I would say that for me, it was a very liberating and calming experience to really start realizing how little I know, but how fine it is that I know so little. Like
yeah.
growing up, I always sort of I was intimidated by the fact that I talked to a carpenter. He knows so much. How come I don't know this? Should I know this?
Right,
Like, I felt bad.
right,
I
right.
talked to an electrician. How come they know? I talked to a baker. How come they know how to do all this stuff and I know nothing? I only know how to
Yep, yep,
calculate basically it.
yep.
And I realized it's the same for everyone. And in fact, even within their specialties, people have a very sort of tip of the iceberg sort of knowledge about uh, concepts or experiences. And that made me feel so relaxed, like, whew, I don't need to understand the world in its entirety.
That's true. So I mean, like, and there's also that like, it's kind of humbling, right? Like the other day, so I had to work on, like I've been starting to believe my own hype and think, man, I know I'm a decent coder, I can write this stuff, and then I had to sort of try to learn Java to solve this problem, and then it made me feel like a complete moron. I was like I'm like, man, how do I not know this? Like, it's quite crazy.
But are you at
But
the point now, Udash, where if you run
yeah,
into something like this, what happened to you the other day, um, you realize that it's completely normal for you not to understand how to do this right away? And do you have the confidence to like learn these skills? Or is it still like I remember when I did an internship at Facebook and I came there the first day and I was terrified. All of a sudden the room was filled with people who one knew much more than me and two were smarter than
yeah,
me,
yeah,
which is extraordinarily intimidating. And it took me, I mean, I had a little bit of life experience at that point. Otherwise, I would have just ran away and take
right,
the
right,
train
right.
back the next day. But it still took me like a week to even do the slightest bit of productive work simply because I was overwhelmed by anxiety.
No, so for me, it's like I still need to work on that. I still need to work on the fact that it's okay and things are complicated, right? So this piece of code that I needed to write, and I finally just spoke to the guy who wrote the package. I emailed him. I was like, hey, can you help me? And then when I finally saw because I've been trying to do this by myself, right? And then when I finally he sent me a piece of code, and when I looked at his code and then I saw how complicated it was, that like when I realized how complicated the thing that I was trying to do was, and how much it took for him to do it. And then I was like, give myself a break, like there's no way I could have done this in a weekend with absolutely no experience. It's totally fine, right?
But that's the thing too. It's sometimes you just I really like when I'm in class and someone asks a question I don't know how to answer. I don't mind that at all because it kind of gives students a sense of reassurance or calmness in a way. Like, hey, it doesn't matter. Like he doesn't know how to answer this. He's here to teach us this. It's fine if I
He-
don't understand something in this course.
like like I had the experience because I was TAing because
Mm.
I'm TAing calculus, right? And the first, I'm just like, so I'm standing in front of class and I'm taking their questions, and I'm just, part of me is just praying to God, please don't ask me something I don't know how to do, like, just.
I completely
But
understand. It's sort
yeah.
of I talked to Paula about this a while ago, and I think one thing that makes Paula a great teacher is that she acknowledges her shortcomings in terms of knowledge. Whenever a student, especially your cohort, like you guys are
Hmm.
intense, you ask questions that
Yeah.
go relatively far beyond what's being taught sometimes.
Yeah.
And just to hear from her as well, like what I do is like if that happens, I'll tell the students like I don't know right now. I'll look it up for next week. We can discuss it. I
Hmm.
think that's the right approach to teaching, right? Especially in our current super information dense society.
Hmm.
There's no one who can know anything, even in their expertise. And just acknowledging that, I feel that it sort of gives students the kind of help they need in a way. Like I find students are often a little bit intimidated at the start of courses, like if they run into a topic they don't understand right away, or they simply feel they have a shortage of knowledge in a certain area. It tends to sort of lead to panic and a sense of sort of inherent incapacity in a way, which is completely
I think,
unnecessary. I experience this every day still.
yeah, yeah, sure. Like I think it also, you need to have a certain mindset as a student to not like when you come into class, to not expect the person standing in front of you to be 100% perfect, right? And it's weird, like some students I know from experience who are just waiting for the person to do something wrong so that they can justify their own lack of interest or lack of motivation or effort or something like that, so they can just say, oh, you know what, that guy was useless anyway, and that class was pointless anyway, so who cares about the grade I got, right?
I hope you're not referring to my class in this case. I
No,
wouldn't
no,
want
no, no,
to.
I'm just saying, like it's definitely
I
a
understand.
two-way street, right?
That's the other side of the matter, right? Like I'm trying to use it as an encouragement, like, hey, it's okay if you don't understand something. But if it's being used as, hey,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
exactly.
okay if I don't understand something. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
That's not the intention.
Yeah. And so, okay. So I wanted to, you briefly mentioned like the kind of world that you'd want to run away from, like where a place
Mm.
where you, what about the opposite? Like, what do you think, like, what kind of world in general, like maybe it could be just be like your personal, the little world, but, or like just the world in the future, like, it could be the most science fiction-y thing in the world, but what do you think, what kind of world is something that's worth like running towards as, you know, for your children or like for future generations? What do you think would be a good looking world?
Let me ask you a question in return, Udesh. What would you consider if you really went down to the core? What would you consider the most important thing in your life?
For me, uh, the most important thing in my life, that the thing that gives me meaning
Hmm.
and like, literally holds me, keeps me from collapsing into a pit of anxiety, is
Hmm.
that I want to be useful, and I found that it's actually quite difficult to be a useful person. Like it actually takes a lot of work, because for most people think, oh, oh, I want to change the world, I want to do this, the ABC. But for me, it's just like I want to be useful, and
Hmm.
I want to make the sacrifices the people have made for me worth it, and not just my parents. I mean, just the broader the broader human endeavor, right? Like, it was not so long ago that we were sacrificing our firstborns so there would be rain and we'd have enough to eat, right? So,
I thought
inter
you might say something like that, and I think it's a beautiful thought that I wanted your listeners to hear. So I sort of wanted to find that. For me, it in a way it's similar. Like I would love to change the world, really. If I could, I would love to,
Mhm.
but I sort of know my limitations as one small human being. And what I really want to do is, like, for me, the most important thing is making sure that those I care about, their quality in life is improved just a little bit. Like, make taking care of my family, taking care of my wife, taking care, even small things, like if I can do something for a student that will help them in one way or another in their future, that for me is the most rewarding part of the job. That's something I really care about. And I'm often spending free time talking to students, just having a bit of conversation, which is something, much to my surprise, students are not as always able to get from their teachers, especially now in COVID times. Just to, it doesn't, I can't do much for students most of the time, but sometimes just a little bit of conversation, showing a bit of understanding for a problematic situation can really make a difference. And, like, I'm happy to invest my free time in that too. I mean, this is something that I personally get a sense of being useful from. I mean, sure, I teach students all these concepts. I teach them stats. I teach them linear algebra. Those are useful in a more practical sense for their future. But if I can do something beyond that, that's where I really find teaching to be a beautiful job.
That's I can't that's I can't think of a better answer than that. That's thank you. And okay, I mean, I want to be respectful of your time, but I have one more question, which is basically what I
Mhm.
ask everybody. Is like, so what advice do you have for young people? Like, it's hard. Like, it's easy to it's easy to, like, look back in hindsight. And, hindsight is 2020, but just in general, like, because I feel like young people are quite a precarious situation, at the present moment. And given the fields that you and I are studying, with AI and
Mhm.
just the ecosystem of information control, right? And the in the era of too much information and not enough knowledge, right?
Yes.
Like, what do you have any advice in how to navigate this search space for
This this is going to
young
be
people?
a slightly elongated answer, I'd expect. So I thank you in
No,
advance
please,
for your patience.
no
Uh,
problem.
so let's think about society for a little bit. Like, I think more than at any other point in human history, the amount of information that we need to process has been increasing at an absolutely crazy pace over the past few decades. And our brains are not equipped for that at this moment, right? So what I see a lot in your generation is people simply not being able to handle the amount of information that's coming at them on a daily basis. And that causes all kind of problems. That causes depression, anxiety, in a more practical sense, things like dropping out of school because it's simply overwhelming. And I can't even blame students. Like, I understand more than students often think. I think I would probably be very much overwhelmed by myself if I were a student right now. And in that sense, I think one of the most important things that I would like to tell students are, if you're experiencing problems, let someone know, like, talk about it, try to look for help, because these are the things that are really going to hold you back in life. I see many very, very talented students who are not doing so great in terms of school performance, but more importantly, are not doing so great in terms of personal life. And it's going to have consequences for their futures, for their quality of life moving forward. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're unable to deal with it in a way that makes you feel safe about the future or that allows you to preserve yourself in a reasonable manner, then do something about it. Um, and this is not. It doesn't have to be like you don't have to go to a psychiatrist, be in a hospital every day to have talks to try to resolve the problem. If that's necessary, that's totally fine. But sometimes just a little bit of understanding or some small changes, like realizing I don't always need to get a 9 for all my courses. A 7 is okay too, if that allows me to have a better life. It won't really affect your future to a severe extent. Um, and you need to find a life that fits with you. And if you now aim something that's above your threshold or above your personal limitations, then you set yourself up for a life in which that continues to be the case in the future, which is something that I think people strive for a little bit too much, even at the cost of their own well-being. And that's
Yeah,
that's
I
how I
agree.
end this positive this podcast on a positive note.
No, no, I
Ending
completely
there.
agree. I think everyone should definitely do that. Like, and maybe I'll make just like maybe I'll record an episode with just me, and I'll outline some of the basic, practical sort of day-to-day tools that I've used to escape situations like that. Um,
For you, I
and
know. Sorry, go ahead, Udesh.
No, no, no. Yeah. So, and so there's definitely ways for people to move to exactly address what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, for you, I'm very impressed by the way you lead your life. It's a little bit. I wouldn't want to. Well, I guess I'll just use the word neurotic. I think
It's okay.
I think you realize it's not an inaccurate description,
Yep, yep,
but
yep, yep. Not in, that's
I
totally spot on.
exactly. But it has real consequences for you in a positive way. Like you think
Yeah.
about what you're doing in life, whether you should be doing it, whether it's contributing to your life in a positive way or not, and
Hmm.
you actively filter your activities and the information you uh, absorb to meet what helps your life and what helps things get better for you. And I think that step, sure, it's a bit time consuming, but it's incredibly valuable to improving your life.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, this has been amazing, and then maybe we'll meet again some another time to talk about like actually I wanted to talk to you about one of your papers, but we got
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that would be
sidetracked.
interesting to your audience in any way.
I know, but it would be interesting. It would be interesting to me. So,
We can talk over a
so
coffee with it.
much. Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you, Peter, for your time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And
I thought it was a lot of fun. Thanks.
okay, great, cool. All right. Well, I'll see you around, I guess.
Bye bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. I hope you got something out of that. And until next time.